What if the powers that rule our lives aren't gods at all, but jailers? What if the sun that warms us, the moon that guides us, and the stars above, the very heavens themselves, are not divine lights, but the bars of a vast spiritual prison? This was the radical claim of the Gnostics, mystical seekers from the first centuries of the Common Era. They whispered that reality itself was an illusion, carefully woven to keep humanity docile, obedient, and blind. And behind that illusion stood the Archons. The word Archon comes from the Greek archon, meaning ruler or authority. In political life, it described magistrates and officials. But to the Gnostics, the Archons were not mere kings or governors. They were cosmic wardens, rulers of the visible universe who served a darker master, the Demiurge. The Archons were not angels of light, nor demons in the sense of fallen spirits, nor were they gods worthy of worship. They were imitators, beings who lacked true essence. They could copy the patterns of creation, but never originate them. They were shadows pretending to be sovereign, bureaucrats of the cosmos carrying out the will of a false god. Their function was chillingly simple: to maintain the great illusion. The Archons patrolled the borders of existence, weaving deception into the very fabric of life, through laws, hierarchies, institutions, even the movements of the stars. Their task was to prevent humanity from discovering its origin beyond this world, to obscure the gnosis, the inner knowledge that awakens the soul. But the Gnostics insisted on a crucial point. The Archons are not omnipotent. They are not eternal deities. They are blind rulers, parasites feeding on ignorance. Their power exists only so long as humanity forgets its true origin. The moment a soul remembers, the chains begin to break. Origins of the Archons and the Demiurge. To understand the Archons, we must return to the strange, almost tragic Gnostic story of creation, a story that runs parallel to, and yet profoundly contradicts, orthodox accounts of Genesis. In the beginning was the Pleroma, a word meaning fullness. It was not a place, but a state of divine harmony, where the unknowable source, the monad, radiated light and truth. From the monad emanated the Aeons, spiritual beings who expressed the infinite qualities of the divine. They existed in pairs, perfect reflections of balance. Among these Aeons was Sophia, whose name means wisdom. Yet Sophia longed to create something of her own. Unlike the other Aeons, who created only within the harmony of their syzygies, Sophia acted alone. Out of her desire was born a being outside the balance of the Pleroma, a malformed child of ignorance. That child was Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge. Yaldabaoth was unlike the luminous Aeons. He was imperfect, arrogant, and blind to the higher realms. Separated from the Pleroma, he mistook his isolation for supremacy. Looking upon the void around him, he arrogantly proclaimed, "I am God, and there is none beside me." In that moment, the greatest falsehood entered the cosmos. From ignorance and arrogance, Yaldabaoth fashioned the material world, but his creation was no reflection of divine harmony. It was a distorted copy, a cosmos built from fragments of truth, but lacking its fullness. To enforce his dominion, Yaldabaoth spawned a brood of subordinate rulers, the Archons. These Archons became the administrators of his false reality. They presided over the planetary spheres, each one guarding a gateway through which the soul must pass. Their task was not to nurture, but to bind, not to enlighten, but to confuse. The Gnostics saw them as the spiritual embodiment of ignorance itself, not beings of true light, but emanations of Sophia's error and Yaldabaoth's arrogance. They were less like creators and more like prison guards, patrolling a cosmic fortress designed to keep humanity from returning to the Pleroma. The Hebdomad, the 7 Archons and their planetary associations. The Archons were not imagined as chaotic or random powers. The Gnostics described them as a structured hierarchy, ordered as the Hebdomad, 7 rulers tied to the 7 classical planets of antiquity: the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These planetary rulers weren't benevolent guardians of the cosmos. They were seen as checkpoints, each one a barrier preventing souls from ascending beyond the material world. When a person died, or when a mystic sought to ascend in visionary trance, the soul would encounter these archons one by one. Each demanded submission, attempting to deceive, frighten, or bind the traveler back into the cycle of rebirth. The Moon. Afios. Afios was the master of illusion and false mysticism. Cloaking the soul in dreams and shadows, he blurred the line between revelation and fantasy. To those trapped in his sphere, dazzling visions might feel like enlightenment, but they were only distractions. Afios ruled over imagination unmoored from truth, keeping seekers lost in hypnotic lights and false awakenings. Mercury, Eloaios. In the sphere of Mercury reigned Eloaios, the manipulator of knowledge. He was cunning, the cosmic trickster. True, knowledge liberates, but Eloaios twisted truths into contradictions. He offered riddles that led nowhere, endless debates that consumed seekers in intellectual pride. His domain was confusion disguised as wisdom, where the clever mistake themselves. For the awakened, Venus, Adonaios. Radiant and beautiful, Adonaios governed desire. But his love was counterfeit, corrupted. He ensnared souls through lust, obsession, and hollow attachments, promising pleasure while delivering chains. Every craving became a thread in his web, binding the soul tighter to the material world. Adonaios was the archetype of beauty as captivity, passion as prison. The sun, Yaldabaoth. At the blazing center stood Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge himself. Some traditions equated him with Samael, blind god or poison of God. He was the false light, a counterfeit sun imitating divine brilliance but radiating domination. Worship of Yaldabaoth blinded humanity to the source beyond. His was the glare of arrogance, illumination that dazzled only to enslave. Mars, Sabaoth. Over Mars presided Sabaoth, the warlord. He embodied wrath, judgment, and violence. His dominion thrived on conflict and bloodshed, on the endless cycles of war that kept humanity enslaved to fear. And yet, in one Gnostic variation, Sabaoth rebelled. Disgusted by Yaldabaoth's arrogance, he turned toward Sophia and was exalted to a higher realm. This paradox, a jailer who glimpsed truth, made him unique among the Archons. Jupiter, Yao. The ruler of Jupiter was Yao, the cosmic bureaucrat. Cloaked in robes of authority, he represented false law and counterfeit justice. He bound souls to rigid hierarchies and hollow rituals, convincing humanity that submission was salvation. His order was tyranny disguised as righteousness. He was the weight of institutions that appear divine but enslave the spirit. Saturn. Aaniios. At the outermost boundary stood Aaniios, the final Archon. Heavy, cold, and inexorable, he embodied despair and fatalism. He whispered the terror of annihilation. There is no escape. You are nothing. For the unprepared, he was the last and greatest obstacle. But for the awakened, he was revealed as a shadow, powerless against the soul that remembered its origin in the pleroma. For the Gnostics, these Archons were far more than planetary rulers. They were psycho-spiritual barriers woven into the fabric of existence and into the human condition itself. Fear, craving, ignorance, violence, obsession, false authority, these were not only external rulers of the cosmos, but inner forces within every soul. To ascend through the spheres was not only a journey through the heavens, it was a journey within. The soul had to confront each Archon as both cosmic ruler and inner chain, transcending fear at Saturn, breaking free of rage at Mars, piercing the illusions of the moon. Only then could it rise beyond the seven heavens to the Pleroma, the realm of fullness and true light. Individual Archons and their symbolism. The Gnostics did not see the Archons as vague metaphors. They described them as distinct rulers with personalities, appearances, and spiritual functions. Each Archon was both a cosmic power and a psychological chain, an outer warden and an inner weakness. To understand them was to recognize the obstacles a soul must overcome. Yaldabaoth, the blind creator. At the heart of Gnostic myth stands Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge. Often depicted with the face of a lion and the body of a serpent, he embodied pride and cunning in one grotesque form. Unlike the radiant Aeons, Yaldabaoth was fragmented, shifting, never stable. Ancient texts suggest his form constantly changed, reflecting the instability of his false cosmos. Yaldabaoth's creations, the Archons, and the material world itself bore the mark of his imperfection, decay, conflict, and mortality. He could mold matter, but he could not breathe divine life. He enslaved humanity in flesh, but could not extinguish the spark of spirit within. His arrogance, his proclamation of absolute divinity, revealed his blindness. In truth, he was not the source, but the shadow of a mistake. Yao, the false judge. Associated with Jupiter, Yao cloaked himself in the robes of law and authority. He was the Archon of ritual, hierarchy, and cosmic bureaucracy. Yao convinced humanity that obedience to structures was the path to salvation. But in Gnostic eyes, this was counterfeit justice. His laws bound, but never liberated. His rituals imitated holiness, but carried no true light. Yao's role was psychological as well. He represented the weight of external authority that crushes inner discernment. The soul that submits blindly to systems, mistaking conformity for truth, remains imprisoned under his dominion. Sabaoth, the paradox of wrath. The Archon of Mars, Sabaoth, embodied war, violence, and divine judgment. His dominion thrived on fear and destruction. Yet, unlike his brothers, Sabaoth's story carried a twist. Some texts describe him awakening to the arrogance of Yaldabaoth. In disgust, he turned toward Sophia, receiving a throne in the higher heavens. This paradox fascinated the Gnostics. It suggested that even among the rulers of the prison, rebellion was possible. For humanity, Sabaoth represented both the cycle of endless conflict and the possibility of transformation, a reminder that even wrath can turn toward wisdom. Adonaios, chains of desire. In the sphere of Venus ruled Adonaios, radiant and enticing. He represented love corrupted into lust, passion twisted into obsession. His domain was beauty, weaponized as captivity. Souls caught in his web mistook desire for fulfillment, only to find themselves bound by cravings that could never be satisfied. Adonaios was the archetype of hollow intimacy, relationships rooted in need, attachments disguised as love. His power showed how even the most beautiful experiences can enslave if they are not illuminated by wisdom. Eloaios, the trickster of knowledge. Linked to Mercury, Eloaios thrived on distortion. He was the Archon of false wisdom, the sophist of the cosmos. Where Gnosis offered direct knowing, Eloaios scattered riddles and contradictions, trapping seekers in endless argument. He embodied intellect divorced from spirit, cleverness without truth, philosophy without illumination. His labyrinth was not made of walls, but of words. The danger he posed was subtle, for he did not frighten or seduce, but confused, leaving seekers lost in illusions of their own making. Afios, master of false mysticism, the Archon of the moon. Afios ruled through dreams, visions, and spiritual counterfeits. He enticed seekers with dazzling revelations, mystical lights, and hypnotic experiences that led nowhere. Afios was the conjurer of false awakenings, giving the sensation of enlightenment while keeping the soul firmly within the prison. For the Gnostics, Afios symbolized the danger of mistaking sensation for truth, the false prophet, the empty ritual, the vision that dazzles but distracts. To overcome him, one had to pierce through appearances and seek the source beyond all imagery. Aaniios, the gate of fear. At the farthest boundary of the cosmos stood Aaniios, ruler of Saturn. Heavy, cold, and inexorable, he was the Archon of despair and final judgment. Aaniios confronted the soul with the terror of mortality, the fear of annihilation, the weight of karma, the voice whispering, "There is no escape." For those unawakened, he was doom itself. But the Gnostics taught that his threat was hollow. Death was not the end, but a passage, and the awakened soul, recognizing its divine spark, could pass through him unafraid. Thus, Aaniios became both the last jailer and the final test. The spiritual prison, how the Archons enslave. The Archons ruled not through brute force, but through manipulation of perception. They wove chains of thought and belief so subtle that humanity mistook them for reality. Fear of divine wrath, punishment, and death. Desire for wealth, power, and pleasure that never satisfy. Ignorance, false doctrines, hollow rituals, counterfeit revelations. Division, conflict, hatred, and war feeding their hunger for despair. But Gnostic texts revealed something more. The Archons used even the stars as tools of control. In the hypostasis of the Archons, they were said to weave the heavens into patterns of fate. Astrology, in this view, was not merely a science but a prison map. The constellations dictated lives, binding humanity to cycles of destiny. Yet the Gnostics armed the soul with weapons of liberation. In secret teachings, passwords, symbols, and divine names were revealed. These acted like keys during ascent, disarming the Archons at each gate. For the Gnostics, knowledge was not abstract. It was spiritual technology, a force that could dismantle the cosmic system itself. Archons in myth, folklore, and esoteric thought. The Archons appear again and again across Gnostic writings. In the Apocryphon of John, Yaldabaoth and his Archons create Adam's body as a prison for the divine spark. Sophia intervenes, breathing life into humanity. In the Pistis Sophia, the Archons of chaos attack Sophia herself, feeding on her sorrow until divine light rescues her. Other texts equate the Archons with the 7 deadly passions: lust, wrath, pride, envy, greed, sloth, and gluttony. Beyond Gnostic scriptures, their imagery resonates across cultures. The Titans of Greek mythology, who rose against the heavens. The Asuras of Hindu lore, forever at war with the gods. Even modern conspiracies of shadow governments and hidden elites echo the same archetype. Powers that thrive on deception, feeding on the ignorance of humanity. For the Gnostics, these parallels only confirmed the truth. Every age, every culture, sensed the same hidden reality, rulers who were not saviors, but deceivers. Overcoming the Archons, the path to liberation. The Gnostics did not describe a prison without offering escape. Liberation came through gnosis, direct knowledge of the divine spark within. This was not blind faith or obedience to ritual. It was awakening, the inner realization that the true source lies beyond all Archons, beyond all forms, beyond even the cosmos itself. The path included inner discernment, recognizing illusions, refusing to be deceived. Spiritual practice, invocations, meditations, and prayers that protected the soul, naming the Archons, identifying their patterns of fear, desire, and ignorance, stripped them of power. Union with the Pleroma, remembering that one's essence comes from the realm of fullness, not from the prison of matter. Every act of awareness was a jailbreak. Every rejection of fear, every moment of clarity was a crack in the walls of the cosmic prison. The eternal battle between light and illusion. Some Gnostic sects offered surprising variations. In one, Sophia herself intervened, limiting the Archons so they could not completely enslave humanity. In another, the soul was depicted as a warrior of light, speaking directly to the rulers. "I am not your slave. I am a child of the true God." At those words, the Archons trembled. The Gnostic message was clear. The struggle is not fought with weapons, but with awareness. It is the eternal conflict between spirit and matter, truth and ignorance, freedom and bondage. The Archons' dominion depends entirely on forgetfulness. When humanity awakens, their power dissolves. If this journey into the hidden world of Gnostic mythology stirred something in you, join me as we continue deeper into these mysteries. Hit like, leave a comment with your thoughts on the Archons, and subscribe to the channel for more explorations of ancient wisdom, because next time we confront the greatest deceiver of all, the Demiurge himself, the false god who dared to claim he was the creator of everything. And the question we'll face together is this: if the Archons are the jailers, what happens when you finally confront the warden?